quote unquote. That was in the leaflets too. That was in the pamphlets. That was in the newspapers. And that was oftentimes connected to this argument of the new Negro. So this new Negro are creating this thing in our society called white hysteria. Also, at that time, they wrote about something else being created, and it was called Negrophobia. 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 Right? Now, keep in mind, Negrophobia, folk being scared of, hating black people, white hysteria, as Butterfield argues, was essentially a quote-unquote a retrogression to bestiality. What does that mean? What does that mean? Those arguments really were arguments of bestiality. What does that mean? What's going on in the leaflets and the pamphlets and the newspapers of that day? What essentially are they trying to do? What image are they trying to create with respect to this new Negro? Yep.
Trying to parallel, I guess, with animals.
Absolutely.
The characteristics, things they need to do, may be similar to that of a dog that you're training. Come by the hand and feed you type of thing.
Absolutely. This is being done on a formal level in our society as a way to curtail criminal activity, as well as other things in the black community. These are the images being projected. Pretty much what happens today in our media with our black men who are incarcerated or who engage in crime. If you really look beneath the surface and really look at how they're being captured and presented on TV and the newspapers and in the magazines, there's a real menacing, animalistic element to it all. Right? Okay, cool, great. These laws affected educational and economic opportunity for all blacks. This whole situation, laws, all of that. During this time, there was a spike in homicides, also in the South particularly, between whites and blacks, as well as white on white, as well as black on black crime. How many people die a year? How many people get killed a year? Approximately. Take a guess. How many homicides go down in America each year? 300 million people live in this country. Interesting. No? Right, they say 1%, a little over 1%, no, not even that, to be honest with you, but about 1.5 million people in America, right, have HIV and AIDS. And you see how big we talk about that, right? And that's a lot of people. Well, about 1 million, 1.5 HIV. AIDS, probably we have about 500,000 people who are walking around the country with full-blown AIDS, right? So that's about roughly 1.5, 2 million people in America either have HIV or AIDS. And that's a huge epidemic as we see in the media. Okay, so with that marker in mind, how many homicides go down each year? I'm talking about cross-race, cross-class. Just how many people get killed?
About 2 million people.
So more than HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else? Yeah? 6 what? Million. All right. Okay. Anybody else? Number's actually closer to hers. 16,000 people get killed each year. Right? So don't believe the hype. You turn that news, right? You're like, damn, why are you getting killed? You can't even walk in this hole. What's going on? Right? But actually, violent crime has decreased dramatically since the 1990s, particularly in federal prisons. I think state prisons, but definitely federal prisons. Overwhelmingly, 2/3 of that population, which is mostly black men, are there for actually drugs, not a violent crime. Violence ain't going down. That's why I know I can do street poverty. I can go to the street corner and collect some surveys, because it's not too many killing that actually takes place in the house. It happens, right? But one of the arguments that I'm trying to make right now, that Butterfield ultimately makes, is this: homicide generally happens in-house. Right? To kill outside of your situation, that's a much rarer occurrence, right? So the Italian Mafia is most likely to be killed by the Italian Mafia. Crips are actually most likely to be killed by Crips. Like so in my class, like psychology, we read Monster, which is written by Kody Scott. Mr. Malone's in that class. But one of the biggest things that we learned, right, in the book, to understand black psychology in the streets, definitely, as argued by Mr. Shakur, or Kody Scott, he changed his name to Sadiq Shakur, is that most people, he's a Crip, most people who kill Crips are of the Crips, particularly inside the set. So most people who die in the Crip gang are actually not only by Crips, but actually your friends within the Crips. That's where you're going to find the highest concentration of killing going on. Same thing with whites, same thing with other ethnic groups, and definitely same thing with these blacks here. That's one of the points Butterfield's making. Yep.
Talking about like murder and stuff, why is it that like Philadelphia seems like always have been a problem city for black people since like the beginning of time to now? The fact that they have like more dead bodies than they do in here, like why has no one ever gone into Philly and tried to do something to help this? Because if black people have been killing black people since Philadelphia was a city.
Yeah. Definitely. I forgot, what is the body count in Philadelphia now? It's somewhere between 500 and 600, I believe. I could be wrong. Last time I checked.
That's what it is.
Okay. And again, in the grand scheme of Philadelphia, in terms of the population, now 500 to 600 deaths is a lot of people. I don't care how you cut that. But in terms of the population, it's probably less than 1% of the people who actually get killed like that. Just like homicide, that's less than, first of all, less than 1% of the population have HIV and AIDS. So, and that's at 2 million or 1.5 million, right? 16,000 deaths a year. That's considerably, I can't even work that fraction out. But that percentage is. That's how small and minute it is. Mind you, that's 16,000 across class, right? So not to minimize Philadelphia, because what's happening there is a problem that needs to be dealt with. But definitely, I think before we approach it, we need to put it in context. This may be controversial. I probably shouldn't say something like this, but I do agree with it, and I do argue with it. And I think ultimately it's one of the points of the class.